Hi, welcome to Mama D's Kitchen. Today we're going to talk about a sweet sourdough mix. And it's a starter that I have started. Actually, a friend of mine in North Carolina gave me a starter. And your starter is made with potato flakes, sugar, and water. And if you keep your starter going and you keep feeding it and you keep making bread and bread products with it, your starter can last for years. It really can last for years. There are a couple of key things to think about when you're making a starter. The very first time I had to restart my starter, I had to kickstart it with yeast. You know, the little packages of yeast that you find in the store. But after that first time, because I didn't keep up with it and keep it going, after that first time, Dave showed this here. This is my starter that I keep going now. And you can see that, you know, I keep it in the refrigerator. And when I want to make bread and I want to increase the starter, I'll bring it out on the counter and I'll make these three ingredients here. So potato flakes, sugar, and water. And I'll mix these three together. And I'll just go ahead and do that right now. And you want to use warm water, half a cup of sugar, 4 tablespoons of potato flakes, and a cup of water. And I'm just mixing that together to get that sugar to dissolve a little bit and to mix those potato flakes up. The key with starter is you don't use metal utensils. So you can use a wooden spoon, you can use a plastic spoon, but don't use metal. And I have been told that metal deactivates the starter. And so just as a rule of thumb, always remember to use a wooden spoon, and that makes it work. So a starter includes potato flakes, because potatoes are a natural starch. So if you wanted to create a yeast from potatoes, try an experiment and just put a potato peeled, put it in a bowl, cover it with water, and leave it. And watch what happens over 3, 4, 5 days. You'll see that the natural bacteria and yeast of the air is attracted to that starch sugar of the potato, and it will create its own natural yeast, which is why we use potato flakes. Now, I've already put my potato flakes in this container, but my potato flakes are Thrive Life potatoes. And you can see all they are, potatoes, straight potatoes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you to come along with me on this journey as we're going to make some bread. The thing about sourdough starter, whether it's your traditional San Francisco style or what we would classify, you might know this as like an Amish friendship bread starter. But I use this to make loaves of bread, cinnamon rolls, pizza crust. You can use it for any kind of bread product that you use. And when we get to the point of actually mixing our dough and making the actual bread, you'll see how few ingredients it takes. There's no artificial anything in this. It's all natural ingredients. So we're going to, this looks like it's all pretty well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix this with my starter that I pulled out of the refrigerator, because now I'm feeding my starter. That's what I just did, is I fed my starter. So I'm going to leave this on my counter, covered up lightly, for 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, depending on your room temperature. Then we'll come back and we'll mix our bread. In part 1 of making sourdough bread, I showed you how to feed your starter. So this has been about 6.5, 7 hours. And Dave, come close so that they can see what the starter looks like. Now, it's not going to be what you think a typical starter, which is a real floury, pasty, watery sourdough starter. This, again, is like a friendship bread starter, so it's sweeter. This is actually your starter. It's a natural yeast. The potatoes, sugar, and water make it into a natural yeast. And so what I will do today is I'm going to make up a loaf of bread, actually 3 loaves of bread making this one batch, and I'll use a cup of this starter. So I'll put it back in the refrigerator, and the next time I'm going to make my bread, I will do the same thing that we did in our first run. The sourdough bread recipe that I have, thank you Miss Brenda for it, we love it, has flour, sugar, starter, salt, oil, and 1.5 cups of hot water. That's it. No other ingredients, no preservatives, no nothing, and it is so good. It's so wonderful tasting. So what we're going to do is what we call just dump it and mix it together and go. So there we go. You ready, Mr. Dave? Let's do this. As you can see, these are my flour and sugar containers because I use them every time I make bread, and so I keep a lot of it on hand. So I may get a little messy, which is why I wear my trusty apron, as I've shared with you before. So we're going to count 6 cups of flour. So 1 and 6. So we are adding 6 cups of flour. And I like to use bread flour on this recipe because it doesn't crumble as much when you go to, you know, cut a piece of bread or anything like that. So then we're going to take and we're going to put a 1/2 cup of sugar. This here is, you can do, if you like yours really sweet, you can do a little more sugar. If you don't like your bread dough real sweet, do a little less. It's whatever your preference is. Because you remember, we have sugar in our starter already. We're going to add, and I kind of ballpark the salt. The recipe calls for 1 tablespoon. Then we're going to just pour our oil in. We're going to pour our water in. And then I'm going to take this. Let me give this a real quick little stir right here. Make sure that all of it's stirred together.
You had to stir that about 2-3 times today.
I did, just because you want it to come together, for lack of a better way of saying it. Now that's almost 1 cup, so I'm going to dip a little bit more because you want to make sure you have a cup of starter. Once I've done that, then I'm just going to start mixing it together. Now the thing about sourdough bread is it doesn't rise like within an hour or two like regular yeast bread would. It needs to take longer to rise. So I will mix this up tonight, and then I will, in the morning when I get up, it will have risen all the way to the top of my bowl here. And then I can roll it out and put it into my pans for the bread. And then it rises another, it could be as much as 8 hours, 10 hours. But usually for me, it takes about 4 hours after I put it in the pans, because I try and put it in a warm place. Now, if you'll just watch here what I'm going to do, just kind of makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to put a little bit of flour on here, because what I want to do is I want to dump this out. And we're going to use that bowl again, so we don't want to get rid of it. And I'm going to just kind of mix this up so that it's all mixed together. Kind of like you would knead regular bread dough. Because we want it to be all kind of elastic-like. Although it doesn't take as long as a regular yeast bread to do. So we're just going to make sure this is all together. Put all these pieces in there. Okay. There's our bread. Now what I'm going to do now is, if you have 2 large bowls, you can use 2 large bowls, but I've gotten to where I just use the 1. So I'm going to take this bowl and I'm going to put a little bit of oil in the bottom of it, not much, and I'm going to rub that around in there. And I'm going to take my bread upside down, flip it, and that's it. Put the lid on it and let it rise. Then tomorrow morning I'm going to come back and it'll be all the way to the top. Sometimes it even pops the lid off. Don't let that concern you if it does that. So come join us back in the morning and watch me do the 3rd step of making the sourdough bread. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know what your favorite recipe is down below. And keep looking up. In the meantime, we'll see you tomorrow. Hi, welcome back to Mama Dee's Kitchen. We have been working on making sourdough bread, and as I've mentioned in my last segment, is that sourdough bread takes several days to make. And so we're looking at the process now of I've let my bread dough rise, and it's risen for 24 hours overnight. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it go into the pans. So we're going to add a little bit of flour to my thing here, just because you don't want it sticking on the thing. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to dump it right out here on this pan, bread dough. I'm going to dump it out right here on this breadboard, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of squeeze because it's already risen. So now what I'm going to do is, you see I've got my 3 bread pans out. I'm going to give them a light coating just because I don't want them to stick. And my trusty little knife that I was telling you about, this just makes it so easy. And I just cut through all 3 of them. Then I'm going to kind of just make them into loaves. I'm just going to put them right there in the pan. Now these will need to rise again. And usually, depending on your temperature of your rig, where you're at, like I mentioned, we are in Texas and the weather here is actually 5 degrees. So this may take a little bit to rise, even though my rig is about 68 degrees. It'll take a little bit of time to rise, but that's okay. Because tonight when I make soup for dinner, we will have warm, crusty sourdough bread. It's that simple. You break it and then you're done. So until next time, keep looking up, and thanks for joining us in the kitchen. Have a great day. Hi, welcome back to Mama Dee's Kitchen. Earlier we were talking about bread, and I told you that I was going to show you when my bread was done, and I wanted you to come along from the start to the finish on this journey with me and let you see how the sourdough loaves turned out. I'm going to just flip one over here. You can see how golden brown it is. Oh, that is hot. But how wonderful the taste will be on it. You really should, if you're going to make bread, you really should let your bread sit for a while before you cut it. Because we've made the mistake of not doing that. And I can tell you that you get a mess because it just kind of goes, it's not firm. So this one is the cinnamon loaf bread, and you can just see that the cinnamon is running all through it. And then these 2 are regular loaves. Even though it's a labor of love and it takes a couple days to make your sourdough bread, it really is good. And it has only natural ingredients. It doesn't have any of the, as I'd mentioned before, the long words that you can't pronounce. But it tastes great. It's wonderful to eat, and you can use it for so many different things. And as you can notice, maybe this side got a little bit browner than this side. And if you know anything about RV ovens, they don't cook evenly. But it's not burnt. It's going to taste wonderful. And what I'd like to do is just slice a piece of this for you. And I wanted to show you my nifty little glove. You wear it on either hand, and it keeps you from getting burned up to, I think it's 450 degrees, that you can just take things right out of the oven. But let me just cut a slice of this if you can, so you can see what this looks like. Look at that cinnamon bread. Isn't that wonderful?
Smells good, and I know it will taste good. Been down that road.
Thank you guys for joining me in the kitchen today. This, as I mentioned, is a labor of love. It takes a couple of days to get through and make your sourdough bread, but it is well worth the wait. I will put the recipe link down in the comments section. Please check out our website at fortsolitude.com, where the recipe will be. Have fun with making bread, different breads, all kinds of different things. There's no limit to what you can do with this bread. Until we see you next time, keep looking up.